Hey everybody, Brian Zane here. This week I'm interviewing a very special guest. Now you might know that my favorite podcast out there right now is the Attitude Era podcast. You've certainly heard me reference it enough times in this show. You've seen members from the podcast appear on this show in a couple of episodes. And this week I'm interviewing the host of not only the Attitude Era podcast, but the host of Cinema Swirl and the host of How to Wrestling. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kefin Mahon. Kevin, thanks for coming by.
Hello, Brian. Very nice to be here. It's a pleasure to be on Wrestling with Regret.
So Kevin, take me back to the beginning. Just how did it all begin? How did the Attitude Era podcast come to be?
Basically, what happened was that I used to do radio shows back in university and stuff like that, and I just moved to Lincoln for a job, which is where I met Adam and Billy, and we tried, me and Billy, to do our own radio show on this student station that was starting up, and we gave it the title of Radio Cart 64. And we were really excited about working together. And me and Billy really had a good thing going. And Adam was like our producer. He was like Roz and Frasier, basically. And then what ended up happening was that we did like 6 shows there. And I think out of the 6, 2 of them actually broadcast. The rest of them, because of technical difficulties or, I don't know, skullduggery at the station. It was an awful experience. And then after that, I was just randomly, I'd been watching a lot of wrestling at the time. We've been listening to a lot of podcasts. I had done a job where I'd been listening to dick loads of, Cole Cabana and OSW and Jim Cornette. And I just approached the guys thinking, hey, would you like to do a podcast? Like we were doing at Radio Cart, same setup, but we talk about wrestling instead. And I thought, how about the Attitude Era? Because I was always going on about the Attitude Era to Billy, because he'd never seen it. And particularly at the time, 2K13, which had CM Punk on the logo, and Attitude Era mode. And me and Adam were playing it going, oh man, Billy, look, Val Venus, he's licking the thumb. It's really amazing. You have to appreciate this. And then he was like, I don't understand. What is this? He's like, no, wrestling was better back then. And then Adam was like, oh, I'm not sure it actually was better. I'm like, no, it was. Wrestling was better back then. So then that's kind of where the idea came from, because I thought that we had good back and forth in chemistry. We spent dickloads of time with each other anyway. So we thought it was a good idea to review the Attitude Era, because I thought me and Adam looking at it kind of with nostalgic eyes, that's going to be interesting. And Billy seeing it for the first time, I thought that would make for humor, because a running thing on the show Radio Cart we tried to do was me trying to trick Billy or catch him out and, teach him new things. So I thought it would work really well, and lo and behold, it did, because I felt a lot of podcasts at the time were like just collections, particularly roundtable podcasts, were collections of people just chatting and agreeing or all just disagreeing. And I knew that me and Adam and Billy like wrestling for different reasons. So I knew there would be an opportunity there. And that's why I thought, on its own, I didn't think the Attitude Era was worth reviewing. I thought, someone else will do it, like OSW will do it or whatever. But I thought, actually, no, with the setup we have here and the fact that Billy doesn't know it, I thought that would be a unique stance on it. So that really actually was the goal, not necessarily just to cover the Attitude Era, but the idea was to teach Billy about a new wrestling thing and see what it was like for us older fans to kind of experience a new fan, getting to know it for the first time.
I was going to ask you about that, because one of the common threads I see among all your podcasts is there's usually 1 or 2 people who have more knowledge and more information on a topic, and they're imparting that wisdom onto someone who's less experienced. Like in Cinema Swirl, Sam hasn't seen all dim films, and in How to Wrestling, Joe was not a wrestling fan before she met you. So does that education factor, educating someone on the show, help set you guys apart, in your opinion, among the vast sea of wrestling podcasts?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't think you can look back at wrestling, honestly, as someone who has watched wrestling. Like, you grew up watching wrestling, I grew up watching wrestling. We are not equipped as new fans, as old fans, to go back and revisit that stuff. We're simply not able to do it, because we've got nostalgia and rose-tinted glasses. And it doesn't matter how long you've been watching wrestling or how knowledgeable you are or how much even you enjoy it still. You can't look back objectively at that period or previous periods, I think. So I do think you do need like a new fan there. And obviously with Billy Netshare podcast, it was for a specific period. But really with Joe, who not only was not someone who hadn't seen a period of wrestling, but any wrestling, it's just, it really makes for interesting discussions. I think that's where a lot of humor can arise. I did really think, seeing what a lot of podcasts, because we started off when there was like, it was like essentially a gold rush, except instead of gold, it was just kind of okay podcasts for wrestling. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry, fans and wrestlers, were just staking claims. It's like, right, we're the night after WrestleMania 27 podcast, and I felt that it needed something else. And teaching is how you explain it best, because I think I found a lot, even when talking with Adam, was that I kind of was like, I would always assume that he liked the same stuff I liked, or he was in on the same kind of jokes that I was in on, you know, because I didn't obviously grow up with Adam. And obviously that's not the case. You need to explain these things. And I think it kind of makes it for even footing with everyone. I like to think that if you can kind of start with the Editor podcast and go along, you can kind of get in on a lot of the jokes that, you know, we as kids maybe would have had growing up with this.
Now, you guys have reviewed a lot of pay-per-views across the Attitude Era, and you've seen a lot of wrestlers develop, have nice character arcs, come and go, and stuff like that. My question to you is, what wrestlers would you say you gained an appreciation for over time in reviewing all these pay-per-views, and who would you say you've actually kind of had a falling out with, who you liked at the beginning and then you kind of fell out of favor as time went on?
There's two main ones for ones that I liked and then didn't like afterwards. And they're for different reasons, really. Because one was the New Age Outlaws, which me and Adam were like, oh, Billy, the New Age Outlaws, listen to this. And they do the little intro, and the Billy's like, what else? No, we sing along with this. You suck it. It's great. It's brilliant. What do you mean? This match is boring. No, it's not. It's the New Age Outlaws. They're the backbone of the Attitude Era. How dare you? They were on that tank once near WCW. And fucking hell, it was really, really horrible to actually turn around and admit that the New Age Outlaws was nothing but nostalgia. Pure 100% nostalgia. Now, when we first started doing it, people were like, look at these guys reviewing the Attitude Era and not saying the New Age Outlaws are amazing. And like, my challenge is this. Anyone who still thinks the New Age Outlaws were amazing, watch 5 back-to-back New Age Outlaws matches, okay? And you will not like them anymore. You just won't. There's nothing to it. Like, they were so overblown by nostalgia. It was just the hype of the time. The other one, which was a little bit more painful to admit, but I kind of saw coming a mile away, was American Badass Undertaker. And even just The Undertaker generally, because The Undertaker scared me when I was a kid. Like, evil demon, Lord of Darkness Undertaker. Like, the corporate ministry gave me nightmares, you know? But really having to come around to the fact that it was kind of goofy. And once Billy said Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and of course I was watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer at the time, I just can't not imagine, you know, Undertaker is like a high concept season 3 kind of Buffy villain, you know, where there's a bit of money coming into the show. So that one was difficult. American Badass, I knew it hadn't aged well, but I didn't know how badly it had aged. I mean, it's aged just about as well as Limp Bizkit and Kid Rock has aged, I guess, is the best way of putting it. But yeah, Undertaker was definitely a bitter pill to swallow. I'd still maintain, though, that when he first came back at Judgment Day, that was the only real point I really disagreed with the guys on the podcast, was him coming back at Judgment Day with the trench coat and the glasses and the mystery. I thought, no, he's still cool. So I still think he has a bit there. But Undertaker has been kind of, just as a character, was a bit of a disappointment. Still an amazing wrestler, obviously, and great matches and great feuds. Ones that I turned around on, there's almost too many to mention. The obvious one is Jeff Jarrett, who I hated as a kid. And there's nothing quite like discovering when you're doing a podcast, like 3 grown men kind of realizing that the absolute bile and hatred you had for someone. Fuck TNA, fuck Jeff Jarrett. Oh, he's rubbish. Every one of his matches, Triple J, I hate Jeff Jarrett. All of it was just because I didn't like him as a kid, because I guess he rubbed me the wrong way. I guess I didn't like his buzz cut and his misogyny and his don't tick me off t-shirt or whatever. X-Pac as well. The exact same thing I could say for it. I completely got sucked in by X-Pac heat. Hated X-Pac. Didn't know why. Just hated him. And then he's kind of doing kind of scummy things throughout the course of me growing up as a wrestling fan, like the weird stuff with China and, you know, he was appearing on that reality show stuff with her. It all just seemed like, oh, what a scumbag. And then really coming to realize what an amazing wrestler he is. His really like horrible, tragic, you know, backstory with his upbringing. I know he, you know, talked to Mick Foley about stuff like that. And to see what like a decent guy he seems to be, I just feel again like, God, that was really stupid. Like someone I hated, like spent time and energy hating. And it really, really feels stupid because I didn't hate those guys in kind of like a, boo, you suck. I want to pay money to see you get beaten up. I hated them in like a, oh, I'm going to turn off this show. I'm going to stop watching wrestling if I have to watch X-Pac wrestle another goddamn match.
What pay-per-views that you reviewed as you watched them with adult eyes, which pay-per-views would you say were worse than what you expected or what you remember? And on the flip side of that, what pay-per-views would you say exceeded those expectations?
King of the Ring 1999 was a pay-per-view that was just me, like, I'd started watching wrestling in 98, but 99, that's when I was kind of like proper, wearing t-shirt, had the toys, was like a proper little mark. And my God, you couldn't tell me there was anything more serious happening in the world right then than, the Undertaker taking on The Rock, and Shane and Vince McMahon taking on Steve Austin for control of the company. I thought it was the greatest pay-per-view ever at the time. I remember that was like I had a strong association as that being like, yeah, wrestling's cool and edgy and weird. And my God, 3 hours of pure horse shit. Oh God in hell. What a slog that was to get through. So many shows, like from 98 in particular, that I remember being like good, which were just death to get through. My God. But King of the Ring 99, there was a couple of really dodgy ones around the late 99 era, but just before Russo left, which were really like difficult to get through. One's in like the year 2000, which I remember enjoying at the time, but never kind of realizing how good they were. Royal Rumble 2000, like it was only by kind of really watching that and reviewing it and going through it in detail that I kind of realized that's like a seminal pay-per-view. Like Royal Rumble 2000, I think should be up there with like, same breath as WrestleMania 17 or Calgary Stampede. I mean, I think there are a number of those 2000 shows when Chris Kresge was writing where they were really firing on all cylinders. Judgment Day 2000, really amazing show. Backlash 2000 as well. Oh my God, what a great wrestling show. Like to think that you can have that level of excitement around not even a big four, like just a random C show like a Backlash or something like that is really like not heard of these days. So those ones would definitely be the main ones.
In your opinion, Kevin, what is the most disappointing storyline you saw during the Attitude Era?
That's a difficult. I mean, I do remember as a kid and as a grown man as well, like not liking Mick Foley coming back for WrestleMania 2000. I think the whole feud leading into WrestleMania 2000, where they had taken something that was quite hot with the Stephanie and Triple H taking over, The Rock trying to get the title and get the momentum. That was one which I remember really having strong nostalgic feelings for and really liking. But even at the time, I thought this show's not good. This feud isn't good. I remember being deeply frustrated as a wrestling fan at the time that there was like a lot of swerves and a lot of randomness with it. I mean, when you think about it, when they did the McMahon-Helmsley regime, Vince and Shane joining doesn't make a lick of sense, like at all. SummerSlam 1999 is the most confusing period in wrestling. They don't know what they are at that time. It's so strange. I remember the triple threat with Jesse Ventura around the time of SummerSlam 99 just being confused as a fan when I was young. And I loved Mick Foley and I loved Jesse Ventura, and here's Mick Foley holding up the belt with Jesse Ventura pointing at him, and I'm like, this is not right. Like, this is strange.
I have to ask this one, Kevin. What's your favorite all-time match during the Attitude Era?
Oh, man, that's a real tough one. I mean, the real boring response is to go, Mankind versus Undertaker, Hell in a Cell. I mean, I really enjoyed, even after having watched it a million times, I really enjoyed, like, us talking through it. That was, like, the first point when I was doing the podcast where I was like, this is really, like, this is something I'm really enjoying to do. I would have to say, in terms of all-time favorites, I mean, Rock and Austin at WrestleMania 17, I could watch that a million times. It's still amazing. Cactus Jack and Triple H. At the Royal Rumble, particularly that encounter, really, really high estimation. I would say that those ones would have to be some of my favorite absolute matches. I mean, the original TLC and the Triangle Ladder match from WrestleMania 2000 as well would also be ones I'd have to fit in there. I mean, those are the ones I'm thinking about, like, big headline matches that have both the quality and also the feuds behind them. There's obviously an infinite number of ones which are like, oh wow, this is a real gem, or ones you wouldn't have thought about.
Going back to the education part of your podcast, specifically your wrestling ones. Now, in the Attitude Era podcast, Billy Keeble, he was a wrestling fan, but he did not watch the Attitude Era growing up. And meanwhile, Joe, like I mentioned, was not a wrestling fan at all. So you have these people who don't know much about the topic, but they have different levels of experience and knowledge in the sport, in the subject. So, in your opinion, who has been more fun to educate, Billy or Joe?
Very different experiences, I think. I mean, I don't necessarily know if I'm educating Billy, but like telling Billy kind of what was the spiel and he's kind of coming up with his own opinions. I don't know necessarily if I educate Billy. I also don't know if I educate Sam on Cinema Swirl. I do feel like I am educating Joe. Billy maybe is being educated by proxy almost, but definitely in terms of introducing someone to it, it's a really tough call. introducing Joe to wrestling has obviously maybe had a little bit, some more challenges, because obviously as someone who is not used to wrestling, I've had to explain a lot more things, and it's a little bit more difficult maybe for me to I can't just go, oh, here's a match. I kind of think, will Joe like this? I don't want to scare her off, particularly at the start, I remember, that's one of the reasons we did How to Wrestling, was because thinking at the start, how I want to ease her in. I don't want to scare her off. I've been in a position before sitting with a girlfriend watching Mark Henry at Hell in a Cell 2011 or whatever the hell it was, going, oh God, I've actually ruined this relationship because we've tried to watch wrestling together. So with Joe, it had to be a lot more considered and bespoke. It was kind of like a tasting platter, like, here's a piece of Chikara cheese, or, here's some chorizo Mick Foley being thrown off a Hell in a Cell type of thing. So I kind of had to be a little bit more on my toes with Joe. So I think it's more rewarding with Joe, maybe. It's a little easier with Billy, so both are great in their own ways.
You and I have something in common in that we have both at times called out things during the Attitude Era for being sexist or otherwise offensive by today's standards. Now, I've received some backlash, some flack from my fans for saying those things. Have you received any similar backlash from your fans?
I mean, we got messages from people saying like some of the weirdest things ever. The email address, I think I mentioned it on one episode randomly, and then we got, messages from people kind of going like, how dare you say the Attitude Era is set? Really kind of angered kind of ones. Then you get just the random ones that it's just all swear words and threats. And then there's been ones where it's been, people genuinely wanting to have a discourse, because I know there are people out there who will genuinely disagree if, I've maybe pointed out something as being, maybe not without its issues, or something as maybe I thought was sexist, or something that was maybe done in poor taste. There'll be people that disagree with that. And I'll be honest, even listening back to the podcast, I disagree with myself sometimes in my estimation. As a man who's, over the course of 3 years, I've grown and matured over that time. And, I've been trying to come to grips with a lot of these issues. So what you really are seeing in the Attitude Era podcast is not someone who's an authority on any of these issues at all. It's someone who was maybe trying to understand what was going on and make sense of it, maybe. I don't think any of the kind of things that I've said, or any of the, responses I've gotten from people, has ever really kind of gotten to me that much. I know that, like, for instance, when Joe disagreed with some of the stuff about Trish Stratus, and even just seeing a minutiae of the things that people were saying about that because it was a woman talking about these problems as opposed to a very loud man, people had a much bigger issue with it. So I think it kind of pales in comparison almost, anything that I've received from people. It's inconsequential. If someone is listening to my podcast and they're genuinely angry about us saying that something is sexist or homophobic or transphobic or whatever it is, I'm in a way, I'm kind of, I'd like to see if that's an opportunity for that person to maybe think about that and maybe even have a discussion with someone. I think at least it's important that those people are at least thinking about those things. There'll always be people who are going to be completely trapped in a certain viewpoint. It's never fun to realize, hey, something that I liked is not perfect. But that's the way it is. You can't be so precious with your childhood or things you've grown up with that you can't be willing to look back and kind of go, hey, society was different 20 years ago. It was, it just was. It simply was. That's the way it is. And you can even just, flick on the TV today and kind of see the difference. Something like Jerry Springer and whatnot, and the real provocative nature of television back then when the Attitude Era was on, it's not like that anymore. It's completely different. And we have different standards, we have different tastes now. Is it unfair to look back at those things and then kind of hold them under new standards? I don't think so. I think that if WWE is going to be putting out, large volumes of past content on the network and putting out all these, DVDs and documentaries saying how amazing the Attitude Era was, I do think it's important to look back and go, hey, the Attitude Era was not 3 years of Steve Austin spraying someone with beer and Triple H, being on a tank that one time. The other stuff happened. It was not all good stuff. There was some horrible things that have happened. And I think that if we can hold it up to a higher standard, it might mean that wrestling might be a little bit more inclusive for everyone. It's really nice to see with How to Wrestling, the types of fans and types of people who felt before that wrestling couldn't be for them. And now maybe because attitudes have changed a little bit in WWE, they feel that it can be for them. And I think that's really positive. And if you really get angry about the fact that it's, more inclusive environment now for wrestling, then that is kind of sad. And I think then that is like something that's just, a bit. I'd be sad for you if you kind of are upset by that, you know?
Now, How to Wrestling is your newest podcast where you educate people about wrestling one wrestler at a time. What's the response been like for that podcast? Have you heard any stories of new fans being born out of listening to your podcast?
I remember being really, really worried at one point and thinking, what if people don't actually start introducing people? Because I was very concerned that the podcast could actually just be a dialogue between us and the fan base of people giving out to me for not teaching Joe wrestling right. Or like 100 people kind of going, no, show her this, show her this, show her this. I've been absolutely blown away, and it's entirely down to Joe's amazing work on the social media of this new fan base that we have, of these people who are watching wrestling for the very, very first time and are actually listening to it and they're giving it an honest chance. They're doing something which most of us wrestling fans kind of would assume that new people would never do, and this is why we don't introduce fans to it. We're going to go, oh, it's fake, oh, it's phony, oh, it's garbage, oh, that's silly, it's lame. What are you doing watching wrestling, you big weirdo? And they're giving it a chance, and they're enjoying it, and they're finding the things that they like about it. I mean, we set up a Facebook group recently called Team Friendship for people just to kind of come and just chat about things that they've discovered and that they like in wrestling. And there's like a great mixture of old fans and new fans. And it's really, really nice to see. It was the nicest things about doing the Attitude Era podcast was finding out that there are these amazing wrestling fans out there who kind of can enjoy wrestling for what it is and not be completely negative about it all the time and not get angry when it's not as good as they want it to be. And I think it's really nice to see that the new fans who are coming on board through How to Wrestling seem to be kind of coming at it from a really positive place. So yeah, we have seen a lot of people, a lot of guys introducing girlfriends, a lot of people introducing it to their mums, and people just introducing it to their buddies and stuff like that. And I think it's really, really, really great to see that people are actually using it and it seems to be working.
So far, you've done 2 wrestling-themed podcasts and a movie-themed podcast. Do you see yourself doing any other kind of subject matter in the future?
I am very, very interested in maybe doing something more to do with video games. Although I do realize, even just taking a cautionary glance at the online community for video games, that I might be saying, hey, I might go swimming naked in a shark-filled piranha pool that's got acids in it instead of water and poo instead of chlorine. So I would like to do a video game thing. I'm not sure what I'd like to do. I do want to kind of find a niche. I'd really genuinely wanted to review Frasier with Adam. And then Kevin Smith, that son of a bitch. Let me tell you something, Kevin Smith. If you think you can come in and steal me and Adam Bibelow's excellent idea, and let me repeat that, an excellent idea, and use it for your own asshole website, I don't accept that at all. I'm very annoyed. I've always wanted to do a podcast where me and someone, each episode of the podcast is just a different trashy as hell reality show. Like Mall Cops of America could be an episode. Duck Dynasty could be an episode. Kitchen Nightmares could be like a 3-episode arc. Me and Adam, as we've mentioned a million times when we've done like bonus episodes, are obsessed with your country's insistence on making every tiny, minute detail of every incident on a TV show the most dramatic thing that has ever happened. So I'd love to do a podcast like that, and I'd love to really spice it up and put in like that ridiculous editing. I'd love to do a podcast where I get to play around with the editing and have a bit of fun. I'd like to do a review podcast of trashy reality shows as trashy reality show editing, like coming up later on tonight. What did Adam and Kevin think of that podcast that they just did? Find out in 5 seconds. I'd love to be able to do that, and I would love to do something. I love cooking. I'm a complex individual, Brian, you have to understand. I love cooking, and I would like to do something to do with cooking. I don't know if that would work as a podcast. As good as my language is, I don't know if I can describe every ingredient and step of the way we need to go on. An audio of bubbling pasta might just be irritating. Who knows?
Now, Kevin, the burning question a lot of fans have been having as you've gotten closer and closer to the end of the Attitude Era. I mean, you just recently released your review of WrestleMania 17, which many people figure is the end of the Attitude Era. What does the future hold for the AE podcast? Where do you go from here?
What is the fate of the Attitude Era podcast? The fate, the very fate, is in my hands. Yes, obviously we live in very different places still, but it's always been the plan to do more stuff afterwards. The release schedule, to be determined. The subject matter, very much to be determined. I will very much say, though, definitely we will have one, if not two episodes where it is kind of a, right, we've done it now. What do we actually make of the Attitude Era? Like, try to come to some sort of consensus. My plan was to call that episode The Similarian, because it's going to be endlessly long and no one really cares about it and no one will really understand what the hell we're talking about. That's the general plan. But I would like to do kind of a, hey, what is actually kind of, you know, what was the Attitude Era for us? Because our opinions change so much over the course of it. It's really difficult to pin down the actual question. Is the Attitude Era as amazing as people, you know, made it out to be? So that is something that we definitely have to tackle still. So the Attitude Era still has a little bit of work to be done there. That's going to happen. We are going to be taking a break, though, obviously, before we get to that. We have to kind of let the dust settle, so to speak. After that, we've always talked about different ideas, about things we wanted to do. Storyline arcs, looking at different companies over a particular period, even just fans voting for different things. It's going to be essentially like A Podcast Presents. You know, maybe we would do some, I don't want to say the Invasion Era, because I don't know if we'll go straight into like the Invasion right after, but I'd love to do like kind of 3-episode arc Montreal Screwjob kind of thing, you know, or a couple of episodes where we discuss, you know, NWO coming back to WWE, you know, how bad that was. I'm not necessarily sure exactly where I'm going to be in a few years' time, you know. I'm like Sting in that way. The only thing that's certain about me is that nothing is certain, you know, but I definitely won't be wrestling Seth Rollins anytime soon. So, you know, that's really it. There's a bit of a question mark there, but plans are definitely in place. We are going to be doing stuff. We are going to be recapping the Attitude Era. We will review other things.
All right, great, Kevin. I have no more questions, so now I leave it up to you to plug your stuff.
Well, if you're listening to this, you're probably already listening to at least one of my podcasts. But if you're not aware, I've been doing the Attitude Era podcast for the past 3 years, where we've just finished recapping what is meant to be the 3 most successful years in WWE history, critically speaking, or money speaking, whatever you want to call it. We review it from start to finish with a fan who's never seen it before, and Billy, and we have a right laugh along the way as we kind of draw it over the coals in some instances, find hidden gems, and also really kind of look back and see if nostalgia was at play or not. If you've not also as well checked out Cinema Swirl, this was given to me. I did not buy my own t-shirt. This is actually a Christmas gift that I was given. But my mate Sam hasn't seen any of them films. Me and Sam used to do stand-up comedy together. Now we do podcasts together. And honestly speaking, it's the most fun that I don't want to say my other podcasts aren't fun, but with Cinema Swirl, I literally go in and I watch a movie and then I just chat about it. There's no work involved. It's great. But it is so much fun to watch these movies with someone who's never seen them before, is very, very much in tune with pop culture, but has not got any point of reference for things that he's never seen before, like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or Rocky or Schwarzenegger movies. And lastly, my kind of main project at the moment, which I'm very, very, very happy to be nearly approaching 1 year with, which is How to Wrestling, which myself and my amazingly talented partner, Joe Graham, I introduce her to the world of wrestling, one wrestler at a time. And it's a very interactive podcast. You can check it out on howtowrestling.com, where we ask people to tweet in their kind of thoughts and feelings and memories on wrestlers, recommend matches and segments. I try to introduce Joe to it and then really get a feel what it's like for a new fan to be, you know, coming to grips with all these different characters and all this amazing history in wrestling. And of course, if you do want to support me in my podcasting endeavors, patreon.com/howtowrestling, where you can become a donor and help out How to Wrestling and all its amazing endeavors in the future. I do review all the monthly pay-per-view offerings with the Patreon backers on How to Wrestling if you're a $5 backer. So it's a good one to join in because, you know, I do not tweet as much as I used to, but I do get a chance to really, you know, talk about the modern product. And watching these shows with a new fan, I must say, is one of the most enlightening experiences ever. So if you do want to see some of the most unique set of reviews of the current product, you can check them out on patreon.com/howtowrestling.
Great, Kevin. Once again, thank you so much for taking time to do this interview. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you very much. As you know, I've always been a Zaniac before Sami Zayn appropriated the term. But thanks very much for being having me on here. It's been great to talk about the show and great to get to talk to you at last, face to face.
All right, folks, that was Kefin Mahon from the Attitude Era podcast, Cinema Swirl, and How to Wrestling. Those are 3 great podcasts. I cannot recommend them strongly enough to you. I suggest you check them out on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, what have you. Check them out today. And hey, those questions I was asking Kevin earlier about the best and the worst of the Attitude Era, why don't you answer those questions in the comment section below? Be sure to thumbs up this video if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and buy the t-shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.